Very patient with us. We will be presenting the consent agenda first, and then the new business. And sorry. Oh. How quickly we forget. Okay, and the items that are presenting on the consent agenda will not be presented as individuals, but will be voted on as one in one motion. If anything on the consent agenda that you would like to see presented, please raise your hand and we'll pull that from the consent and make a full presentation. Well, at the time that they're doing that. Okay, and then the appeal of the decisions from this Historic Zoning Commission pursuant to the provisions of 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Law, notice is hereby given that a final hearing before this commission is applicable to the Chancery Court of Davidson County or the Circuit Court of Davidson County by way of statutory writ of certiorari. You are advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decisions of the Historic Zoning Commission. And at this time, I'd like to present the approval of the minutes from April the 18th.
Move approval. Move approval.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And today we have Commissioner Allen, Councilman, that would like to speak to us.
Covered up. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Berkeley Allen. I represent the 18th District. I have several properties that are from that district that are on the agenda. Would like to just very briefly address two of them. First, 1820 Wildwood Avenue. There was a request for demolition. The staff has recommended that this be denied because of the historic context. Those are homes that were built in around the 1840s. Not 1840s, that would be historic, 1940s, and have become sort of their own little historic context. Originally, much of the neighborhood was brought into the conservation zoning overlay because of its 1820s construction time. So the overlay was put in place over 10 years ago. We've come closer. These have now, I think, become appropriately historic, and the staff recommends that as well. In addition, the context of that street tends to be very much smaller homes. People have bought property in that area because they appreciate the small homes and the larger yards, and that's the character and the feel of the street that is part of what is trying to be preserved through the conservation zoning overlay. What is proposed is much larger in scale and in mass, and is not necessarily appropriate for what the major context of the street is. So I would ask for your consideration of the staff's recommendation on that. Secondly, I would like to address 1809 Sweetbriar. That's an infill. Again, it's a part of the street that tends to be smaller homes. What is proposed is larger in scale and in mass. Again, people have bought property on that part of the street because of the historic context of smaller types of cottages and a backyard that you can actually play in. And that's again, part of the character that we're trying to preserve. So I would appreciate your strong consideration of the staff's recommendation and that those two particular ones be denied. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Back to work.
All right, at this time, we go to the consent agenda.
We have 3 items today on the consent agenda. The first item is 119 Blackburn Avenue in the Belle, Meade Links Triangle Neighborhood Conservation Overlay. It is an application for a rear addition. The second item is 1301 Eastland Avenue, which is an application for the demolition of an existing addition, non-historic addition, and a application for new construction, a rear addition, and that rear addition needs a setback reduction. And finally, 217 South 10th Street is an application for a new addition. It's a detached modular classroom structure in the rear of the property, and that also needs a setback reduction.
I think there's a hand that wanted to pull something from the consent agenda.
Yes, 217 South 10.
Okay, so we can pull 217 in your presentation, 217 is South.
Sure. Staff finds that the two remaining items, 119 Blackburn and 1301 Eastland Avenue, meet their respective design guidelines, and in these cases, the owners have indicated that they are okay with the staff recommendations, so we recommend approval of those two with the staff recommendations.
At this time, do we want to see the presentation on 217 South? Okay.
I apologize to begin with, I don't have any images available on the PowerPoint for this project, but for the commissioners, it should be in your staff packet. So 217, just let me get my bearings here for a second. The existing structure at 217 South 10th Street is an institutional building that was constructed about 1937. It's currently being used as a charter school. In 2011, MHCC staff issue a permit for a detached modular classroom structure, and actually you can see that structure that's existing in the bottom picture. So that was approved by staff in 2011. Excuse me. The current application is for a similar modular structure to the one that has already been constructed, and it'll be constructed in front of and kind of behind the historic structure, but in front of the existing modular structure. It'll be about 19 feet 6 inches tall and will be about, let's see, I'm trying to find the dimension, sorry, in my my notes. It'll be about 60 feet by 60 feet, and again, 1 story in height. It will not be connected to either the existing modular structure or to the historic building, except for from the uncovered deck, which you can see there in the photograph. It will have a flat roof, which staff found to be appropriate because the existing historic structure has portions of a flat roof. It's kind of a more institutional type looking building. And because this structure is kind of it's meant to be temporary, staff found that the roof line was appropriate. Staff found that the proportion and rhythm of openings was appropriate. All 4 facades contain windows that are approximately twice as tall as they are wide, and there aren't any large expanses without window openings. The materials for the structure will be smooth fiber cement siding with a 7 1/4 inch reveal. That's a larger reveal than staff typically looks for. However, for this type of structure, it's a kind of a prefab structure, and the 5-inch reveal is not available. So staff found that the 7 1/4 inch reveal was appropriate in this instance. Sorry, just going to quickly review. It does require the project does require a reduction to the side setback along Fatherland Street. So the site is at the corner of South 10th Street and Fatherland Street. This structure will face Fatherland Street, and codes requires that it be 10 feet from the property line, but they are proposing to be, the building, the new structure will angle in a way so that at its one corner will be 14 feet, so it will meet the setback, but then it kind of angles to match the angle of the historic structure, and at its narrowest point it'll be 7 feet 6 inches from the property line. Staff finds the proposed setback reduction to be appropriate because the new structure is aligning with the historic structure and matches the angle of the historic structure. Because this is a temporary structure and because approximately only 1/3 of the structure will not meet the required setback. And finally, because the structure will only be a maximum of 2 feet 6 inches closer to the property line than what is otherwise required by codes. And in conclusion, staff recommends approval, finding that the project meets Section 2B of the Lockeland Springs East End Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. I'm happy to answer any questions from the commissioners.
I will add a little bit to that. That's also gone through the MDHA design review process, and they also did approve it with the condition that it only be for the remaining years on the lease of the school and of the specific building, which is approximately 6 more years.
Question for staff. We see, all the elevations are there. Never mind. Thanks.
This item is open to public hearing. Folks in the audience who would like to address the commission, please come forward. Give your name and address, please.
My name is Carol Norton. I live at 801 Boscobel Street in the Edgefield Historic Zoning District. There are a couple things that I want to say before I make my comments. One is to clear up some inaccuracies. This building was not built about 1937. It was built in 1939, and it's carved in stone in the building. It's not an institutional building. It's been a community building since it was built. There are archaeological elements of the preceding building, which was to the rear of the structure, that are now obliterated, which was a band shell that was created there. It was a park originally, and then this community building was built in 1939. I think over the time since this property has come before you in the last 5 years, the commission has failed on a number of occasions to carry out your charge, which is to protect and preserve this property. Initially, several years ago, some of you may remember, you issued a demolition order. I feel a particular affinity for this building because it was my research that pointed out the error in allowing that to happen. You also have failed to, as you are instituting your review criteria, to assess the impact of the proposal on the property and the surroundings. This particular building that is proposed to be built is 60 by 60, plus the additional portable that's there, together exceed the square footage of the existing historic building. And that seems to be just wrong in every sort of way. It is visible, highly visible, from Fatherland Street. One of the other things that I would like for this commission to do in assessing the impact on the community is to request a traffic study. Traffic at the intersection of Fatherland and South 10th is already impacted negatively by traffic in the morning and the afternoon or early evening. The addition of a 60 by 60 foot temporary building, how 6 years is not very temporary, is going to impact it even more. During the time between now and school is out, the farmers market moved because the traffic was already so congested at that location. Hopefully, they will be able to move back to the larger location. We all know why you're doing this. It doesn't mean I like it. I think the staff has failed in putting this on consent agenda and approving temporary buildings and using the Lockeland East End conservation zoning guidelines to justify it. I think the commission, in accepting this and allowing it, is a travesty. It is not preserving this building, it is not preserving our neighborhoods, and I urge you to disapprove the addition of the 60 by 60 temporary building.
Is there anyone else that'd like to address the
Hello, Joe Bucher, Southeast Venture. I'm here on behalf of the owner. I understand Carol's concerns. We did spend some time and effort in rehabilitating the existing historic structure. As stated, this is a temporary building. It is a temporary fix for the charter school, which is occupying the site for another 6 years. The charter school does service the children of the neighborhood. This is considered a neighborhood commercial site by the MDHA overlay of the area, the design guidelines, which we've tried to follow to the best of our ability in using a portable structure, even though it may not be quite as permanent. And a traffic study is underway that will be submitted as part of the permit process for this building.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? I thought I saw someone stand. Would you like to address the commission? No. Is there anybody else? Okay. All right. All right. At this time, we will close the public hearing if there's no one else that would like to address the commission and have a discussion. If there are any questions of staff.
I guess this is my first portable unit since I've been on the commission. Are there, and since it's temporary, I'm assuming there's some leeways that we kind of live by in situations like this, and is that correct, or is it? And can we encourage landscape buffering if we want to, if we approve this, or is that within our purview?
There was some landscape buffering required when the first one went in, and they did accomplish that. Not through this body, but we did look at it as a temporary building, and this type of building has minimal, if any, impact on the historic building, so that's the direction we were taking. Obviously, we don't do traffic studies and look at the use and those type of issues.
Any questions? Motion?
Not sure I like it at all. I certainly can understand the neighborhood's concern about. It's a portable structure. It's a portable classroom, and on one hand, this particular street, isn't lined with historic homes. I don't think there's any homes across the street that would be looking at this. It's not breaking the rhythm or pattern of the street in terms of the historic homes, but at the same time, 6 years doesn't seem very temporary. I'm curious what happens at the end of 6 years, either through MDHA's requirements or by law through zoning.
And Mr. Butcher may be able to answer that more carefully, or more completely, but from my understanding is that the charter school system has a lease for 6 more years. It was 7 total. And so then this particular school has leased the portable building. So at the end of that time, this school will move, and that lease may or may not be renewed, and another school comes in. Is that fairly accurate? Is it all right if the applicant comes back to answer that question?
Sure.
And that being said, with the lease being extended or renewed, that portable stays?
Well, at this point, MDHA has a condition on it that they would have to go back to MDHA, so it may or may not stay.
Okay. And what was the condition when the first portable was added?
I don't believe that MDHA had any conditions.
No, we were all aware that the second phase the second portable that would be pushed up on the street would come before you all and come before MDHA to review its impact, and the first portable didn't go before them. They approved it to be installed administratively without going before the board. From a temporary standpoint, as Robin stated, the lease does expire in 6 years. I can't speak beyond that point, exactly what happens. As it is right now, those buildings are to be removed from site. The charter school is to move out. What happens past that point, if somebody else comes in and renews the lease, somebody else goes and puts some more portables on the site, I would assume they would have to come back before you.
Would it be out of our realm of responsibility that within our motion we could specify the conditions that we might put on it about the temporary building after 6 years?
Sorry, what was the specified?
Whether we could specify or address the fact that after 6 years that we deal with the portable building again, this one particular portable building. In other words, that it wouldn't be just assumed to be remain in place for the next person to lease.
Less temporary than 6 years. Or more temporary than 6 years.
Yes.
So I'd like to ask our legal counsel if it were not to come before this body in 6 years, could it legally be occupied with, what's my question? Obviously, it's got to go before MDHA. If MDHA denies approval at that point, that structure can't be occupied? Does the structure have to be removed? Can the other building, the historic building, be occupied?
It would depend on what MDHA rules on that particular issue in terms of what their conditions would be. If you all wanted to include in your motion that this is an approval to last a certain number of years, and then they'd be required to come back to visit this commission for determinations as to appropriateness of the building, or if there are any changes or things like that, or if you wanted to even make it make the approval based on this particular occupant, I think you could do that as well legally, so that the approval is with this occupant. So if someone else wanted to come in and get approval to use the building, they would have to gain the approval of this body for its use, assuming that MDHA approves it through whatever means it has to go through there. I think that would be an option for the board as well.
Could this board require removal of the building after 6 years?
I don't see why not, because that would go into your analysis as to what is appropriate, and that's what the charge is for this body to determine design appropriateness. So I don't know that it could not. The only question I wonder about in terms of if there are any property rights in the building, how does that, the notion of having to remove the building, how that plays into that. I'd like to look at that issue before giving a determinative opinion on that. But certainly I think you could make this approval that you're giving today have some length of time associated with it, or make anyone else come back to you for approval before it's occupied by someone else, make it owner specific or time specific.
One last question. Typically, the ownership doesn't necessarily apply, but does Metro own this building?
I'm not aware.
That's my understanding, and it's being leased by the school.
And this is why I ask, are Metro's rights, property rights, distinguished any differently than any other private property owner in terms of use of structures, temporary use of structures?
I don't know about temporary use of structures. I think the use would be governed by the same use provisions that are under Title 17 as any other structure would be. And that's the reason that they have to come before this board and any other body, even though it's a Metro building. Typically, they still, for instance, if they had to get a variance, they'd have to go before the BZA. If they had, even Metro facilities have to do that.
I guess what I'm getting at is that if we can legally require it to be removed after 6 years, that's really, sort of meeting the intent of, I think, the staff recommendation, because the staff recommendation was clearly, on the basis that this is a temporary solution. And so if we can require it to be removed after 6 years, which I guess there's maybe some question whether we can legally do that, perhaps.
I'd like to reserve judgment on that until I have an opportunity to look at that issue. But again, I think you could accomplish the same thing by putting a time limit on this particular order that you issued today with regard to it, or requiring that the new lessee come back for approval before it's even occupied. At that point, you would have the same opportunity that you do now to review for appropriateness, and I'm sure by then we would know whether or not you could ask them to remove it or not. But that would be my only hesitation, is I haven't looked at that specific issue with regard to removing it. I understand the logic. I follow your logic exactly in terms of if you're allowing them to build it, inherent in that is the authority to require them to remove it. I don't necessarily disagree with that logic.
I know, I mean, a 5-year period in that area, which is really, really booming. And there's some vacant property that could be developed across the street. So I think the concern of the neighborhood would be how, that we would want to address it then, because a lot could happen and will happen in that period of time, I think, to the surrounding area.
And there's no determination whether this user would extend a lease or not. It may not. That's not determined at this point, I see. Could I ask the applicant? Is that okay?
Hunter, I will say that as it is my understanding that the current charter school that is in there is actively looking for other sites, and they're looking to move into a more permanent solution. So I know that part. Whether somebody else will occupy it after, I cannot speak to.
Okay, I think if we did put something like that in the condition, that it would be regardless of who the person is that's leasing that building, whether it be they're extending their lease or not, that in 6 years, that's the temporary building, we would want to review the applicability of a temporary structure being there.
And perhaps in your motion, you could even reserve the right to require demolition of the structure or removal of the structure if you deem that it's not appropriate. I think you could put that in your motion. If they come back within the next 5 to 6 years and the board determines that it's no longer appropriate for the area, that you could require, that you will require removal. I think that would be an appropriate motion as well.
Clarify for me who is building this building. Is it the owner who is leasing it to the school, or the school?
There's a company that manufactures them, and the school is leasing it from that company. So it's not actually constructed on site. It's just brought in, and then at the end of the lease, presumably removed.
But it's the school that has brought it in.
That's my understanding.
Belongs to the school.
They're leasing it.
They have made the arrangements with the construction company.
Yes.
So if the school moves, they could take their building with them.
They could, yes.
With that in mind, with that clarity in mind, I understand exactly where Commissioner G is going, and I agree with you. That is an option if you wanted to have them to remove it. That's the clarity I think that I needed in order to understand whose building it was and under what conditions.
So law doesn't protect the temporary structures like it would have probably, I think it would have. Portable structure, like I think it would a permanent structure, in that I don't know if we could require a permanent structure to be torn down in the future. Is that right? Right,
and it seems like from what I'm hearing, the building is being leased with that in mind. So I think if that were an option that the board wanted to exercise, with that in mind, I think that would be okay. And I think that would be the thing that would be distinguishable from a permanent building, is that permanent buildings are not built with the idea of removing them potentially at the end. I haven't seen the contract, but I don't know that it doesn't have a provision in there that says that if you default on the lease, they won't come and get the structure. So by its very nature, I think that might be something that, given that explanation, that might be an option for the board.
And I'm sorry, did you say there are landscape buffering requirements through MDHA or through the standard zoning?
Through standard zoning. And that was, and I apologize, I don't remember how much it was, but it was on the opposite side of the lot between this lot and housing development on the other side. And so they added buffering at that
So
location.
there's no required landscaping in the front yard, or I guess this is considered
Not on
a side
Wildwood,
yard?
no.
Can we ask for that as a condition? Can this board ask for that?
Yeah.
It's not something that's necessarily in the guidelines. It's not something that we typically look at, but neither are leases.
Is the applicant willing to do that? Put a landscape buffer on Fatherland in front of this temporary structure? I think that may help some of the neighborhood concerns.
Well, I would say, they plant big trees, and in 6 years, they become bigger trees, and then we want to protect the trees, and I think we're heading down something that I wouldn't, yeah, that we're, to take down the building, we destroy the trees, or, so, or we maybe could specify the size of the landscaping.
Like bushes or something.
Yeah. So.
Do you want the
All right.
applicant to answer that question?
I'm sorry, we got kind of sidetracked. Would the applicant be willing to plant temporary landscape? It's not trees, but some kind of hedge or bush that would, could be removed if need be in 5 or 6 years without uproar.
I think that would be reasonable. Of course, with the notion that you don't want to draw more attention to it than.
All right. Do I hear any other questions, or do I have a motion?
Okay, let me see. I don't suspect anyone here knows the landscaping buffer, appropriate landscaping buffers based on the zoning code. So
commission approve it. The staff approve it.
just have staff approve it.
Give them a little bit.
Okay.
I think we're getting outside of purview.
Well, I guess I would.
Approving, a landscape plan, we don't want to get into that.
I guess I would typically agree on any permanent structure because it's really not in our guidelines, right? But given that this is, if this were a permanent structure, would staff be recommending approval as designed? No. So given that it's a temporary structure, it wouldn't be approved as a permanent structure or recommended approved. Then perhaps there's ways that we can mitigate its negative impact and let staff work through that with the applicant. So I'm going to take a stab at this, and feel free to offer any amendments. I recommend approval of staff's recommendation with the additional conditions that the approval runs with the leasee. Is that correct? Lessee of the structure, and that the approval is good for 6 years, and at that point, I guess the owner would have to come back before this body for an extension or determination of appropriateness, and that a appropriate streetscape landscape treatment is similar to others in the neighborhood, in this residential neighborhood, would be included in their plans and to be worked out with staff. Is that?
Okay.
Mr. G, might I offer the amendment that these rights do not transfer to any subleasee?
Yes, sure.
So we'd like to amend the motion to include that. Okay.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Thank you.
So now we're on the.
That was the amendment that we just
Yeah.
approved. So now we need to approve the
Oh,
motion
okay.
amended.
All right, there is an amended motion. All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of the amended motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion with amendment passes. 1820 Wildwood.
Okay, the first scheduled item of new business is an application to demolish the structure at 1820 Wildwood Avenue in the Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. The applicant is Brent Craig of Rigid Development. I'll stay on that one. 1820 Wildwood Avenue is a one-story house with a brick veneered exterior and a limestone block foundation. The tax assessor records indicate the structure is being constructed in 1953. However, city directories list the property as being there at least as early as 1944. And the property was outside of the boundaries of the original Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay when it first went into effect in 2005, but was added in a later expansion in 2007. Most of the addresses on the 1800 and 1900 blocks of Wildwood Avenue first appeared in those city directories in the early 1940s when the area was platted. This is the plat map from 1941. The structures on these blocks are typically described as being of the minimal traditional architectural style, which is said to reflect the form of traditional eclectic houses but lacks their decorative detailing. This is an architectural style that originated in the 1930s, but it's most commonly associated with suburban development after World War II. You might think of Levittown developments as being a post-war minimal traditional neighborhood. And if you think of architectural styles as a family tree, this style's parents would be colonial revival, and it's also related to Tudor and Craftsman styles. The typical architectural features include a very shallow eave, low-pitched roof, often front-facing gables, although there is the Cape Cod type, the Cape Cod form that is without a front gable. And the buildings in this area of Belmont Hillsborough were likely constructed by the same developer, as they are fairly homogeneous in style, form, and massing. Each is a one-story brick side-gabled house, rectangular form with a central entrance. There are slight variations in roof lines and chimney placement, and roughly half of the houses have a small side room set back from the front face of the buildings as seen on 1816 and 1818 Wildwood, the two on the bottom row of those photos. Following the expansion of the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay in 2007 and again this year, staff has had an opportunity to resurvey these properties and determined that the 1800 and 1900 blocks of Wildwood constitute an intact cluster of minimal traditional houses that contribute significantly to the historic character of the larger district. This cluster, with the exception of some recent infill at 1901, 1903 Wildwood, 1822, and 1824 also are contributing. And there is a structure in 1819 Wildwood that is contributing but predates the minimal traditional style. Staff recommends disapproval of the application to demolish a contributing structure at 1820 Wildwood Avenue, finding the structure to be contributing and to have historic interest and value, and that its removal would be detrimental to the interests of the public and would not meet guideline 2B1A of the Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. I'll add to the councilperson's comments that we've received public comments via email, and I believe they've been distributed. And I have a few copies here as well if anybody needs another. And I believe the applicant is also here.
Okay.
You may wish to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. At this time, this is open for public hearing. Are there any questions that you all have of staff before we open the public hearing? Okay. Those of you that would like to address the commission, please come forward. Give your name and address, please.
I wanted to speak after the applicant, but
Actually, should the applicant speak first?
Sure. I mean, if they would like to.
Can I note that the slide calls this Lockeland Springs? So if anybody's as confused as I was.
That's incorrect. I apologize for that. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Brent Craig. My office is at 9005 Overlook Boulevard in Brentwood, and we are the applicant. Good afternoon. I did not get my information in time to have it on the slide, so I apologize. We have handouts. It feels like college all over. Anyone in the audience that would like to have one is more than welcome to as well. Sure. I think I have an extra right here. I would like to make a quick correction. The council member that spoke earlier had mentioned in her comments that what we were proposed to build was not matching the neighborhood. We don't have anything under proposed right now. This is just a demo. It's not a building structure. I think she indicated that there might be a plan in place, and there's not. Looking back at the property, there's a couple of things that cause us to believe that it is appropriate for the demolition of this property. Several things inside the guidelines. We can address the size and scale of the house. Number one is we cannot determine yet, other than the tax records, that it was built in 1953. There may have been another structure there, but this house, the tax records obviously were 1953. I believe that is outside of the realm of the historical conservation area. Some of the other dates that are listed on these comments on through page 7, 8, 9, well, 10 and 11 on the staff recommendations, we could not verify anywhere, either in the tax record or public records, that they were accurate. We pulled tax records, and on your map, we did it as best we could to indicate the address and the date to which the addresses themselves were acquired, not acquired, but the property date when the property was started or when the house was built. You can see that the two parcels to the left are two massive duplexes that were built on address 1824 and 1822. Those were built in 06. Then the two properties across the street were built in 06 and 02. Of course, that was prior to the expansion of the overlay. I believe that's why that happened. The property to the right, the best leakability, and the property to the other side was 1955 and 1972. I don't believe this is uncommon to have some of the parcels or lots to be vacant. As we do it as infill builders, we have many of our lots are vacant, and we purchase them inside the overlay, and they've never been developed or never been built on. That it would be normal to think that there were infill lots, especially on this street as well. So to think that all of these homes were built in 1941, I think, is an assumption that is really not to be considered. The guidelines for the other argument is on page 12 of the actual guidelines. It says, number 6, new construction should respect and not disrupt established pattern and rhythm existing historic buildings on the same and opposite sides of the street. Well, the opposite side of the street and on the same side of the street, there are no historic buildings. You have to go down several lots to acquire those. And then the actual historical value of those lots are in question because we can't determine exactly when those structures were built, because if you believe the tax records, which we would believe that at any year the government's going to get as much of the money as they can, that some of them are dated 41 and some of them are dated in the 50s, and some of them actually are dated in the 70s as well, all along the street. The other point is on the page 24 of the articles of number 2 under when demolition is appropriate. if we refer back to the actual staff comments, I'm jumping around, I apologize. I hope you guys have lots of questions for me. On page 5 of the comments, on paragraph 3, it says largely revival houses are also contributing, largely because they are not considered as historic as other styles. Well, in the guidelines, it states under the ability to do a permit, a demo, number 2 on page 24, it says, and its removal will result in a more historically appropriate visual effect on the district. So if we are going to go by the guidelines and produce a home that is more visually effective for our district, then it would seem logical that all the other factors involved, that it would be appropriate to demo. Going back with the structure, we certainly understand that we have to be, as we'll address in the one of the other 3 properties we have listed today, that we have to be congruent with the other historical homes on the street. So it's not, we have no house planned, but we understand that the street would have to have historical character with the scale massing of what we put back. It would not be according to what is of the non-contributing structures next door and across the street. We understand that the staff would not allow that because the guidelines do call for us to match the closest and nearest historical structures. So hopefully that would deter a lot of some of the comments that were voiced about what would be going back. I believe that's everything. I would like this, can I ask a few questions rather than just make a bunch of comments? And it would be just for staff and for our education. You know, we hear quite a bit, so I'd like to become as educated as possible. By the way, staff has been great to work with. They always are. The question is, what is the, because I've read through the Belmont historical guidelines and things, and it has no dates of what is appropriate. Like, when does it start? When does it end? What are we looking for? As developers, when we go and we assess a property, we talk to Sean or we talk to you guys. I mean, somewhere on the staff at least 3 or 4 times a week in purchasing property and building. And a lot of what we do, we take at, you know, information we hear, and a lot of it we took at like tax records and things. So what is the I guess staff level and the board's guidelines for what is an historical structure? Is it a year date? Is it form and function of what was presented here under this home, or how do we as determine what that is?
Robbie, can you address that?
I can. We look at the same things that they do for the National Register, and date is just one factor. So date is one factor. We also look at materials and context and style, and is this one building? I mean, we've seen similar buildings like this demolished elsewhere in the neighborhood because they were out of context. They were in the middle of bungalows and Queen Anne's and Four Squares. But whenever there is a very good collection of a particular style, that's what we're looking at preserving, and that's what we found here.
I agree with that, and that some of the homes that were presented, absolutely 1941s, they're there. This home in particular, with the replacement windows and the vinyl siding, I mean, it just appears though it has lost so much of its historical value. I can't imagine anyone listing this in a retail market and listing it as a historical home, much less. And the question I guess you even asked earlier is that if I was to present this plan to rebuild, would it even be approved? And I just don't see how it would be. The windows are not placed right. There's more wall space than what would need to be. The penetrations are not correct according to the very guidelines that are posted.
Okay, I think we don't need to start talking about all the other homes. I think
I'm
we've
sorry.
got an applicant.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too far
Yes,
off
ma'am.
the track, but I thought your question was a reasonable one on how we look at those things. Are there other questions that apply to this application? I mean, the specific style and date.
I'm sure there are, I just can't find them. When you look at a home and you look across, when it says across the street and down the street, are the homes directly across the street or next to it? If they're non-contributing, are they considered or not considered?
Non-contributing homes are not considered.
In any part of it?
In terms of the demolition or in terms of?
Well, if we look at what the tax records show and you take a percentage of homes on the street that are contributing and the percentage of homes that are not contributing based on tax record, I guess based on dates is what we were kind of going by, what you're saying it's form and function.
And date.
Both, right.
But keep in mind that the dates in the tax records are not always accurate. So we got our dates from historic research, maps, directories, that type of information.
Certainly. We're still at about a 50% saturation of, I guess, contributing homes or homes that haven't lost, in my opinion, lost some historic value.
And we felt like it was a higher concentration than that.
Okay. Do you all have any questions for the applicant?
Not for the applicant, but with this new information, I just have one clarification for staff.
Okay, let's go ahead and hear from the public, and then if there's some clarification, okay. All right, is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? Please come up and give your name and address.
Hi, I'm Sandra Shelton. I live at 1830 Wildwood. I'm in the lower left-hand corner up there. And I've been on Wildwood since, well, it's been 38 years. I knew owners at the time I moved in who had lived there since the houses were built. And I dispute the fact that any of these were built outside of the 40s. The elderly people that were my neighbors told me these were all built at the same time. You know, they moved in, they raised their children there. Anyway, so I dispute that. I've also done historical research on my house and found the early dates. And I've been in the house in question. It looks just like mine. It's got the same materials. Those things change over the years. I believe that they're all to that date. Also, there are 20 houses on the street that look like this. His percentages don't gel with me. Either the 4 new structures at the top of the hill that he's mentioned, next door to the property in question are 2 very large duplexes, and then across the street is an 8,000 square foot castle. Next to it, a slightly smaller castle. Those were all built as we were trying to get added into the conservation overlay for the neighborhood. So that sort of destroyed the entire look of the top of the hill on Wildwood. Sloping down from those properties on each side are 20 houses just like this with beautiful yards, lots of trees and greenery. Again, it's why I bought into this neighborhood when I did and why I continue to live there, although I could move to more elite property. Also, I find that these smaller homes are a wonderful idea for our new green movement. And I have also purchased a house at the corner of Wildwood and Brightwood, which is identical to this, which was in extremely poor shape. I rehabbed it completely with everything new inside and out for a minimal amount of money, and it's now a beautiful addition to the neighborhood. I don't see anything wrong with leaving these houses. A developer could work with what's there, rehab it, add onto the back if necessary. But anyway, that's the only other thing I have to say. When this house sold, I was trying to research it online to find out what was going on, and I called a real estate agent for the company that handled it, and I said, is someone planning on demolishing this house? And she said, oh yes, your street's going to be the next one to go. All those houses are going. So that set me on a warpath. But anyway.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? Come forward.
Bob Borzak, 1503 Woodland Street, East Nashville. I just got a question, why are we approving demolition before a plan is even submitted? Because then it becomes up for grabs again, and if somebody comes in and wants to demolish all of them, it destroys the whole neighborhood. So I don't think this is a precedent we should be setting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Are there any other questions that you would like before I close the public hearing? Now, your clarification was with staff. Okay. All right. At this time, I'll close the public hearing. Okay.
So Sandra actually brought the fact up that the two homes that Ridge Development had brought up was 1903 and 1901. Yeah, the two big homes on that street was done before the overlay, right? So was that a demo and an infill?
We have comment from the audience, yes, and I was not here at that time, and I could not say for 100% for sure.
Okay. That was just clarification on that. Thank you.
Okay. Right. A little bit of history. I mean, I know, having been here several years, that we really were reluctant to approve a demolition unless it was an outer building or a back building without having a plan in place. I mean, I think we've sort of gotten away from that. Any reason that we're sort of not sticking to that plan?
I think that part of that reason is the economy changed so much. The idea of that was not to have empty lots, but there's such a push to build, there was no real concern. In this case, we didn't think it was a concern since our recommendation was for denial of demolition.
Okay. All right. Comments? Motion.
Well, I cannot see any reason, any way that we could approve demolition of this house. And so I'm sorry. I said I'm not convinced that there's any reason there that would allow us to allow demolition. And so I move for, I approve what the staff recommends. I approve for disapproval of demolition of 1820 Wildwood Avenue.
A second.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. Second. Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. 1419 Holly.
This one gets a little complicated. Right now, we have a section of our ordinance that allows you to change bulk zoning requirements. One of those bulk zoning requirements in areas that are already zoned for duplexes require that duplexes be attached. In the past, that has not really worked very well. It hasn't really met the context very well. So we started looking at, could we use that portion of the ordinance to not require that duplexes be attached? It looks like we can do that, although we do need to change the definition for two-family, and that is in the works right now, and if all goes well, will be approved by the council this June. So what you're seeing today is a proposal in the hopes that that definition does change and we are able to approve it. And I'll explain that a little bit more when we get to the end. So this is for a duplex that will require the demolition of a non-contributing accessory structure that is there at the back of the lot now. This is very similar to what you saw in, I believe it was March, although they are not attached like you saw in March. In order to not spend too many time reading the staff recommendation to you, we found that it really does meet all of the requirements of the design guidelines and all the requirements of the policy for detached duplexes that you looked at last month, with just a couple of exceptions. So if it's all right, I'll just sort of concentrate on those areas. Here you see the bigger context of the area. Here's the footprint that is proposed with one facing Fatherland and a carport attached attached to that with living space above, and then a second home in the back that's slightly smaller with a detached garage. Here's the front that will face Fatherland. And here you see the side of that main structure that will face Fatherland. And then this is the back unit that would face 14th. And I'm going to go back to the site plan.
Where's Fatherland?
That's Holly.
I'm sorry, Holly Street, thank you. The one that will face Holly Street. However, the proposed carport that is located at the center of the lot and attached to the house that you see in the site plan here is more than just a simple carport with 4 posts and a roof, as this carport has substantial corners, potentially allowing for garage doors to be installed at a later date, and it has second-story conditioned space. In addition, the policy for corner detached duplexes only allows for 1 carport or 1 garage on the entire site, not for each building. Staff recommends removal of the middle carport from the design and the addition of a concrete pad, and then addition of windows on that back elevation. And with these conditions, the project meets Section 2B8. Staff also recommends approval with the conditions that staff provide final review of windows and doors, again, that the carport not be attached or not be included, and that the existing driveway be redesigned to either be 1 lane of concrete strips or appear to be 1 lane by using another product such as a turf paver. With this recommendation, based on the understanding that permits can only be issued for the demolition of the existing building and for the construction of the primary building that faces Holly Street, we recommend approval of both that primary building that faces Holly Street and the demolition of the existing building. And then at a later date, the applicant could come back to you for approval of that second building, which faces the side street.
If the bill passes.
If the bill passes.
Robin, do they have to, could we not approve this today as is, and if the bill doesn't pass, they can't do a detached structure?
Legal has advised us not to.
If it pleases the board, because the authority is based on what the definition of two-family is under the zoning code, which says specifically 2 detached dwelling units separated by at least 10 feet, notwithstanding the foregoing, 2 detached dwelling units within a historic zoning overlay district shall not be permitted. And then the bill actually deletes that language, shall not be permitted. But as of right now, the board would not have the authority to permit something that is not permitted under the zoning code. So in meeting with staff, what I had advised was that the board could pass on portions of it that currently would be consistent with the zoning code, and that the applicant needs to be aware that if that bill does not pass, they may not be able to come back to the board to get permission to build that second structure that is sought on the property because of the definition. I think it has probably gone to second reading by now. I know it went on first reading, I think on the 5th, on the 1st of, around the 1st of May.
And it does have the Planning Commission support. And they're wanting to get started right away. And so even if the applicant can address this more completely, but if they do get a permit to build the front building, which faces Holly Street, and for some reason the language does not pass, the definition does not change, then they could still come back to you with a plan for that second unit to be attached to the current unit. So we felt like they could get started with something that could go easily either direction, if that makes sense. It could be, the second unit could be attached or detached depending on how that definition goes.
But it's still with a detached duplex, which
I know.
It's an empty or subdivided property.
Yeah.
It still will only, they will only be permitted to have 1 carport or 1 entry into the property?
That's our recommendation, based on the...
Well, but is that what the bill, I mean, the bill is still supporting that as well?
No, the bill that's before the Metro Council is just to change the definition of two-family. It doesn't do anything else. It doesn't go any further than that. But what you approved last month, or reviewed last month, was a policy for how we would handle it if we could allow people to have 2 detached duplexes. So that's just a policy that can change at any point that you want it to, but that's what staff was looking at.
Robin, can you walk me through the objection to the carport and the first structure? I mean, are you advocating us having cars just out in the open, or I mean, what am I missing here?
Right. We looked at, in coming up with that policy that we brought to you last month, we looked at all of those corner lots that appeared to historically have been developed in this way, with a smaller building in the back. The vast majority of them, and I apologize, I don't have the exact numbers with me tonight, the vast majority of them did not have any type of parking structure. If they did have one, they only had one. So in order to follow that historic context, that was something that we added to the policy, that there should only be one garage or one carport, and that in this case, with the design laid out this way, they could have a parking pad behind that main structure that faces Holly, and then the garage on the back facing the alley.
When we talked about that policy, weren't we looking at examples, and maybe I'm just remembering specific pictures,
right?
But where the entrance to that was not on the street, but was on an alley or service alley.
Right.
But not on a major street. But here they could have an entrance from a street as well as entrance from the alley?
Well, there's actually two ways that we tweaked the policy a little bit in looking at this project. And one was that second building had to be in the back 30%. Well, as you can see, that isn't really doable. So we thought, well, okay, maybe that's something that needs to be rethought. Ideally, there would be a driveway from the alley that accesses both buildings. But due to the narrowness of the lot, we thought perhaps in this case, it did make sense to allow for a curb cut on the side street.
Okay.
So those are two things that are a little bit different than what we talked about last month.
So we're tweaking our policy, suppose. Right. But we're tweaking our policy in this case.
If this is allowed, it would be changing that policy.
Okay. So if we are ultimately, if the bill passes, we go with this plan.
Right.
We've set the precedent.
Correct.
And to be clear, also the policy, it would be legal's advice to readopt the policy once the bill passes so that it could be adopted officially. I think last time we were here, staff was having the board to pass on the policy so that they know a direction in which they would, that the board would approve of them going. But in terms of having it as an official policy of the board, it would be my recommendation to adopt it as official after the bill passes.
But we set a precedent when we approve something, and then the neighbor comes and says, you let them do it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm still, not to make a big deal out of it, I'm just still a little bit troubled by the elimination of the one carport. I get it, I understand it, but it just seems like if you take away a structure of some sort where cars are supposed to park, then you run the risk that cars are going to park where we don't want them to park. It could be before they get in the driveway, all the way in the driveway, or kind of in the front yard. Or is that a concern at all for you?
We saw that the parking pad that allows for two cars is the exact same as the carport, except that it doesn't have a structure over it that could easily become a garage. Again, this was not just a simple carport. It's got living space above it. It has massive columns on all four corners.
Okay, what was that part you said it could become a garage? Is that something that is permitted or not?
We're saying no, that there shouldn't be two structures based on historic development. So there's two cars could still park there in the same way, whether the structure's there or not. So we weren't concerned about parking elsewhere.
Could you have just a cantilever kind of coming out from the home with columns with like a porte-cochere? Is that permitted?
That'll be up to you. This is a new policy. Again, based on the historic development, we would recommend that there just be one parking structure.
Any other questions of staff? Well, this item is open for public hearing. We have someone that would like to address the commission. Step forward. Give your name and address, please.
Hello, my name is John Root. I'm with Root Architecture, and I'm the architect representing the applicant at the property in question. I guess to recap a little bit, we did present this in March to you. A two-family dwelling that was attached And it was our preference to detach them because we felt like there was historic precedence out there to detach them. And when working with staff, and we met with the neighborhood in April to discuss some of those issues and talk mainly about massing and scale and those kind of vehicular, pedestrian, traffic patterns. And I think the resultant design, I think, is successful on a number of different scales, but and I think we've accomplished or mitigated a lot of the concerns that a lot of people have. I think there still are the concerns about the carport. I kind of like to challenge staff's assertion that could become a garage, because I think if anybody were to modify that structure, they'd have to come before this board and get that. So I don't buy into the, let's deny it because it could become a garage idea. I think the idea of that it is substantial and it does mesh into the architecture of the house, I think, is actually beneficial instead of just being a secondary structure that's kind of tacked on to the house. My client did have a need for additional square footage, so we were trying to add square footage above that carport area. We did talk briefly about maybe making that a screened-in porch area for the homeowner, but again, I don't think that. I think it'll be used as parking eventually anyway. So I'd rather show you a carport option with open on all three sides. It would take a substantial amount to enclose that garage, and we would lose square footage if we deleted the conditioned square footage above the carport as it is. Have a question for staff. On conservation districts, do y'all review materials for driveway? I didn't think that was.
In a conservation district, we look at, if it's a new project, we look at absolutely everything.
Okay.
But I will clarify that at a later date, we don't review cladding, and so if someone did come in with garage doors, it wouldn't come before you, and so that was our concern.
Okay. All right. But something like adding a garage door, obviously, it would come back through staff, wouldn't it? No, it wouldn't?
No, that's why we were concerned.
Okay. Well, I think, we could put the condition on. I guess I could propose to put the condition that a garage won't be added without historic's approval. Is that an option to mitigate that concern?
That's a question for the commission. Again, staff stand by their recommendation.
All right. I guess I believe that the revised project that we've come up with does meet the intent of the guidelines very well. It meshes nicely with the surrounding context of the neighborhood. And I would like to please ask you today that respectfully ask for the board's approval to go forward with the project, with the understanding that we can't pull a permit until the definition is changed. Thank you.
Y'all have any questions for us?
If I may, I'm so sorry. I wanted to add one more thing that we received via email during my presentation, and that was an email from the Lockeland Springs Neighborhood Association that is in support of staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Is that what you would like to add? Okay. Does anyone have any questions of the applicant? Okay. Anyone else that would like to address the public hearing?
My first question, Bob Borzak again, 1503 Woodland Street. My first question is footprint. Define footprint. Is that basically what the house rests on, foundation? Then the math is wrong. And basically, if you take 1419B, that comes out to be 1,077 square feet. Footprint. And I believe that's fairly accurate. And in 1419A, excluding the carport, you end up with 1,344 square feet. Now, staff recommends a 60% difference, or the secondary structure to be no more than 60% of the primary structure, which it would fail miserably because we're talking 1344 to 1077. Now, if you include the carport and turn that into living space, then you get almost exactly 60%. And it would also eliminate all these issues that we're talking about, access from, South 15th and going into the side of the house and so on and so forth. That became a living space instead of a carport. So that is my point of it, and we got somebody else who's addressing other issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, would you come forward?
Hi, I'm Julie Kalberg. This is Jack Kalberg. We're at 1503 Holly Street. We're just here to represent some of the adjacent neighbors to this property and our displeasure with the new plan as much as the old plan. We commend the historic's opinion regarding the carport, that eliminating that and at least having it appear as a single lane driveway will help with the rhythm of fitting in with the adjacent properties, because we all have single lane driveways. And we do share the concern of Ms. Ziegler in the report regarding walling that in and making that a closed garage at some point. We feel little control over that, as you can understand, as we see this plan adjacent to our homes. A major concern that I have is the subordinate B structure not being that subordinate to the 1419A. If you look at 17th Street and Holly, there is an example in the neighborhood of precedent of a large 4-square home that would be representing the footprint of A, and then the subordinate structure B is quite small. It's under 1,800 square foot footprint. But I would look at that as an example of precedent in this situation of how to make a subordinate structure with a setback that is the normal 20-foot setback as all the other homes on this 15th Street block. What we're wanting to do with this development, what the architect's putting in, is such a shallow setback with B that then any other homes, which would ultimately be demolished on 15th Street and then other mega structures put in, will be right on the curb, except there isn't a curb. So what you're looking at is a 15th Street pavement with 5 feet away, this mega structure starting up. That is abhorrent to the neighbors in the neighborhood. We have these beautiful little quaint cottages and full-growth trees, and we like the quaintness of our block. And this is a very stark construction project that we don't approve of. So we really urge that, since there doesn't seem to be a give or take with the setback, usually if there's a setback requirement requested, they're putting in a sidewalk or doing something in trade. Here we don't see anything except that they just want to maximize square footage with a subordinate structure. And I don't think that really is legitimate reason to give the setback allowance. So we would really like to see a normal 20-foot setback with the subordinate structure to set a positive precedence for the rest of the block and be consistent with 17th and Holly, where this already exists. And this is the last comment, since last time I came off as a tree hugger saying that there would be 2 old-growth magnolias. There's a total of 9 old-growth trees on this plot of land. I just want you to consider that when you're talking about taking out 9 old-growth grove of trees and then putting so much pavement that there's barely any grass there, and there's already power lines lining both sides of Holly, and this is a corner where there are crux, it really is going to be ugly. So even if you put in some nice potted plants, it's really not going to do it for us. We really hope that you support the historic comments, and as the neighbors and I agree, we really just want something quaint as you would in your backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Carol Norton, 801 Boscobel Street again. Before I make my comments, I have a procedural sort of question in terms of guidelines. If this ordinance passes allowing this type of building arrangement for detached duplexes, according to guidelines in all of the historic preservation districts and the conservation zoning districts, any amendments that are created, whether it's initiated by the neighborhood, whether it's initiated by the commission, or I'm assuming by council, neighbors have to, property owners have to be notified by the commission, and there has to be an opportunity for public input by the property owners to discuss the proposed amendments. Is that correct? This is a really big amendment to historic guidelines in this city to allow this type of division.
Both structures will still follow the existing design guidelines, so it doesn't change the existing design guidelines. It just keeps them from having to be attached, which don't meet the historic context.
Well, I would disagree with that, Robin, on a couple issues that I'll discuss later. What I'm asking is, if this ordinance passes, is the commission required to notify each historic preservation district and each conservation zoning district of the change that will affect the guidelines in their district?
If the board is asking, if the board needs clarity on that, I'm happy to address the question. The ordinance itself is noticed, and there are opportunities for persons who are interested in the bill to be aware of that, as they would any piece of legislation. The piece of legislation that is up right now does not address the establishment of design review guidelines. It only addresses the definition of two-family in the zoning code. So it doesn't speak to the guidelines themselves in the manner that I think is being suggested. But nonetheless, notice of the ordinance has already gone out as it would for any notice of or ordinance change or amendment to any ordinance.
That's not what my question was. The zoning would allow a different type of building thing with detached duplexes, which changes the guidelines in the districts. The commission is charged, and it stated that this is your business. Amendments to design guidelines may be proposed, et cetera, et cetera. Proposed amendments are distributed to property owners who are given the opportunity to discuss the proposed amendments at a public meeting prior to a vote on the amendments by the commission. Now, the policy that you discussed in March, I can tell you that most of East Nashville historic preservation and conservation zoning districts had no idea what's happening. It has a big impact on how guidelines are implemented in our neighborhood districts. So my question is, if this ordinance passes, is the commission then charged with notifying us and allowing us, not with the public comment for the ordinance, but the public input related to our design guidelines?
If you want me to take that question, I can. The answer is no, because the ordinance does not govern what the design guidelines are, nor the policy. So the answer to the question as to whether or not, if this bill passes, that would trigger then a public input that would be required for changes in design review guidelines. The answer to that, short answer, is no.
Okay. A second question related to that is
Nonetheless, this is an opportunity for persons to be heard rather than necessarily questioning the board. So with that in mind.
If I could interject so I understand. So there's a zoning ordinance change bill that's out there that doesn't change our guidelines at all.
That's correct. That's correct.
And it's going through the proper public notification process. Carol referred also to the policy that was discussed. I wasn't here before, but the policy. And there may be the need for a clarification of our policy versus our guidelines.
The policy also does not change the design guidelines in any way. If the two buildings do not have to be attached, they are two separate buildings, and you have guidelines for that, and you follow those, and you will continue to do so. The policy provides you with a little more direction on the best way to handle that, just like all of the italicized information in the design guidelines that you have now that can change without public comment, because it doesn't change the guidelines. It's just further clarification. And that's all the policy is, further clarification. If the buildings still have to be attached, you still have guidelines that you follow. That won't change. You'll still follow the same guidelines.
All right. I'll now address my comments to the things that I think are inappropriate as far as this particular development is concerned. This is under new construction and additions, number 3, guidelines, setback, and rhythm of spacing. There is no rhythm and spacing of buildings on South 15th. There are no buildings within a block in either direction, which is the immediate context, that face South 16th. The addition of a secondary building on 15th is an interjection that is inappropriate for most of East Nashville. Now, I heard staff say that they surveyed the neighborhood and such. I would like to see a list of those because I know they are few and far between. Generally speaking, the context of homes facing the numbered streets are such as you have on South 12th, where there are the traditional, modern, whatever that you've found over in Belmont, the cottages that were built in the 40s, and there's a row of them. Almost never do you see 2 full-scale homes built on the same lot, which is what this in effect is. They're just not subdividing it. Very, very few instances throughout East Nashville, maybe in other parts of the city and the urban area, that is not the case. But in East Nashville, that isn't the case. The outbuildings, as the previous speaker noted, the outbuildings are smaller. The Historic Commission many years ago commissioned a survey of the existing, at the time, outbuildings in East Nashville. Most of them were in Lockeland. I think y'all have forgotten about that study because what it did was to show that of the existing historic outbuildings, most of them were very small. You need to get it out and you need to read it again. There is no rhythm, and you are charged with ensuring that rhythm and setback is maintained. If there is none, I find it inappropriate for the commission to create an artificial setback. By state law, this commission has to follow the Secretary of the Interior's standards for treatment of historic properties. And I submit to you that if you allow 2 large homes on a single small lot to exist in an historic neighborhood that we all, staff and commission included, for the past 30-plus years have worked so hard to protect, you are not doing us justice. I'm sorry that the applicant wants to build 2 giant homes. It's inappropriate. That's not your place to determine how much money they spend for the lot and how the numbers crunch. You've told people that before. What you are charged with is determining what is appropriate for the specific location of the application. This application, as you have heard, is oversized and too crowded for this property, both in size, scale, setback, creating an artificial rhythm, and I would urge you to disapprove this application, even on the condition that they can come back later. I would like to offer a compromise or a suggestion for the applicant. Under the UZO, an apartment above a garage can be created. And that was done successfully on Fatherland Street, and the house sold before the drywall was finished. So if they want 2 living units, that's another way to do it.
Thank you, Phil. We've got a long agenda, so if...
I'll be very brief.
Well, I'm not asking if you've got new ideas and new points, I'd like for you
I just wanted to address the setback for this project. My name is William Lewis. I'm the homeowner at 1416 Holly Street, directly across the street, so I'll be looking at this every day for the rest of my life. My wife and I oppose allowing a smaller setback at 1419. Our house is 28 feet from the street. I measured it this morning. The other homes on the block are about the same. This extreme variance would allow this house to stick out like a sore thumb. It wouldn't really have a front yard like the rest of the street on Holly. and it would very much crowd onto 15th as well. The variance, we believe, completely disrupts the rhythm on Holly Street, and the developer's desire to maximize this project doesn't justify that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? Any questions that the commission has before I close the public hearing? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Items open for discussion.
I also have concern that we are going to be setting precedents on this particular one. I recall that we had conversation about it, I guess it was in March because I wasn't here in April, that, like the ingress egress from North 15th, we talked about that then, and setbacks. We've had other projects that were concerned about setbacks, so I'm not sure I know, but I just want to have that for discussion, that it's kind of a new thing, and we need to be careful.
I've got a couple of questions for staff. Could you clarify the setback issue in terms of what, are they asking for a variance to the setback?
Well, not a variance, because we don't deal with variances. But you do have the ability to reduce setbacks, or even set setbacks. In this case, a corner side is required to set back 20 feet. But in looking at the historic context, just one block over, there were homes that were much closer to the street, and therefore we thought that it just being the porch extending into the setback area would be appropriate.
And this is a setback from North 15th?
That's correct.
Okay. And this is the primary structure?
No.
It's the secondary structure
secondary,
that faces, yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My second question is relative to the footprint sizes of both the primary structure and the secondary structure. Could you touch on what you know about the precedent in the neighborhood with the examples of two homes being on the same lot, same 50-foot lot, both perhaps in size and in percentage?
The 60% that we came up with was based on the research we did, not just only of this district, but all of our historic districts, where historically properties have developed in that way, where there was a primary building, and either soon after the construction or much later, the property was either officially subdivided or another dwelling unit was constructed in the back. And that's the percentage roughly that we came up with that matched that historic development.
And what is this proposal, the percentage?
So it's 60%.
It is 60%.
Yes, he met every part of that policy that we talked about last month, with the exception of the curb cut and the two parking structures.
And the what?
Two parking structures, a garage and a carport.
And so now my third question, sorry. I'm having trouble understanding the opposition to the carport.
And again, that's just fully based on the research of the historic development, that they either didn't have any kind of accessory structure or garage, or they only had one. And so since this is already so much to put on one lot, we thought one structure would be enough. And we went with the garage being appropriate since it's located in the appropriate location close to the alley and at the back of the lot, but that a carport or a garage at the center of the lot would not be appropriate.
Well, I guess I'll weigh in how I feel about this. There are dozens of examples throughout East Nashville and so many of our historic neighborhoods, and some of the most charming situations of these homes that are built back behind the primary residence, many of which the porches come right up to the sidewalk. There's some on South 12th, a few blocks from this, 12th and Woodland, I guess. And there, I mean, it may be a matter of opinion versus guideline, but to me, those are some of the most sort of unexpected surprises, charming places that we can find in these historic neighborhoods. The character of the architecture that's been presented here is beautiful, I think. I think what it fits right into the neighborhood. they meet the 60% on the second dwelling unit, and the garage is, or the carport is really sort of tucked about as far back behind the building as you could get it. I do like the idea of the single lane driveway because how it affects the streetscape and the precedent in the neighborhood is a narrower driveway. But I'm having trouble seeing the offensiveness of this when there is precedent. I'm a believer of infill, and that we, there are opportunities like this to continue to intensify our urban core in an appropriate way that can fit into the neighborhood. So
I think the one, and I agree there have been, although I think some of the ones that I have seen that have the major entrance is on the Holly Street, for example, and then there's not a major entrance to the structure, the secondary structure, onto a side street. That there appears to be a porch, but it's not a major entrance into that structure. But again, I think that's the attached, where the two are attached. I think we're going to have to be really, really, really careful on this new definition of a two structure and not being attached, and the way we present it architecturally on these side streets. I think we have to be very careful.
When the ordinance is passed, and that might be a question for council, then does this come back to us for review or not?
The only matters that the board can legally pass on today would be I guess what they would call the front or the primary structure. So on that issue, the board would not have to have them to come back. However, if it passes and they want to continue with what they have laid out here in the fashion that they had, they would need to come back, because you're not giving approval today on the second structure because there's no authority to give that approval in this manner. So essentially, the description of the project describes it as to construct two single-family residents. There's no authority to do that on this kind of parcel at this point. So the only thing the board could approve is to construct one single-family residence. And then after the bill passes, they could come back before you for that second structure if it passes. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
But by no means by the approval of this commission today, if we do that primary structure, that they're to assume that if that passes, that we would automatically agree to the second structure as they have it designed here.
No, ma'am, and I think that if that's made clear in your motion, I think that'll carry the day.
I have one other comment related to the whole timing of this thing. It's somewhat unfortunate in my mind that the applicant wants to move forward with one structure and not wait for the ordinance, because what we're really being asked to approve here is, 1419A as drawn and nothing else on the site, which then raises the question of, this is a property that has an alley, that should be utilizing the alley for their garage and driveway access. So if we were looking at this as a single-family home, one dwelling residence, on the lot alone today with this design, without the second structure, it's probably not what we'd want to see as a single structure. But, so it would be, ideal if the applicant could wait till the ordinance was approved, hopefully, and I say hopefully in my mind.
Until the ordinance is heard and completed,
right,
whichever way it goes.
Yeah, can we defer? And
you can.
I don't know if there's, if the applicant, I understand the applicant would like to move forward, but is there any, is the applicant willing to defer?
I hope I haven't spoken out of turn. I'm having a conversation with staff over here about the procedure for deferral. typically, other boards that I've represented, you do have that authority, so this may be a little bit different, so I'll reserve judgment on that question.
We'd like to see the applicant asked to defer.
Okay, thank you.
Or withdraw.
Okay.
Or withdraw, yes.
I guess, should we amend the application for 1419A in lieu of a two-family dwelling at 1419 Holly? Would that, I think my applicant, my client still would like to demolish the existing home, and they would still like to get going on the front house. And I guess to do that, would we need to go back and amend the original application, and then do a second application for 1419B?
Well, that was our recommendation, that they approve the first and the demolition, but they have concerns with that, so they're asking if you are willing to defer the whole project.
I think the concern about approving the front part of it is if we were only approving that front part, we would be asking for the access from the service alley, and we would be approaching analyzing what you've designed here differently.
Right. I guess what's the timeline for that?
It should have. I don't have my council agenda before me right now, but if I'm not mistaken, it probably went before second reading last night. I can confirm that, though, after the meeting and give an approximate timeline as to when it would be on third reading.
I believe it's the day before our next meeting.
Is it okay?
So I guess
it's a month.
If it's 1 month, I think we could probably do that.
Okay.
We'd be in favor of 1 month deferral.
The applicant is asking for a 1 month deferral. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll move we defer 1 month.
All in favor? Okay.
Is there a second?
All right.
Thank you for bearing with me on that deferral issue.
We don't have to vote on that. They ask for the deferral. Okay.
We don't have to vote on the deferral.
No, he is asking for the deferral. Okay. 3924 Kempalong. Lose track.
John? Is this you? The pens up here? Somebody used a pen. All right. 3924 Kempalong Avenue. This is an application for partial demolition and new construction of an addition to a structure in the Woodlawn West Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. The architect or applicant is Preston Quirk. 3924 Kempalong Avenue is a one-story craftsman-style house with a hipped roof. The house has a wide horizontal plan with shallow gabled projections on both ends. It has a central shed roof dormer vent on the front slope of the roof, flanked by two gable roof dormers. The structure gains an additional story in the basement because the grade drops towards the rear. And as I said, the applicant is proposing to enlarge the structure with a rear addition. That addition will set in from the rear side corners of the historic house by 2 feet on each side. On the left side, that new wall will extend 24 feet to the rear. On the right, it will extend 12 feet back and then set back flush with the outside edge of the existing wall and then continue back 24 feet. The addition increases the footprint from 2,000 square feet to 3,600 square feet. Which is a scale that staff finds to be compatible with that of surrounding historic houses and meets the design guidelines. The roof of the addition, as seen from the left and right, will be hipped with slopes matching the form and pitch of the existing roof. The central mass of the addition, I'll go back to the floor plan there, forward of where that swimming pool, so just the central mass of the addition behind the original structure. We'll have a low-pitched roof extending up and back from the ridge of the existing roof over that first portion of the addition. All of the other roofs will match the height of the historic house or to be otherwise compatible, and because the majority of these new roofs, as I said, are compatible with the existing structure, and because that taller central roof will not have a significant impact on the character of the historic house because of the perspective and distance from the front, the right-of-way where the house would be viewed. Staff finds the application to meet the design guidelines for height, scale, and roof form. The materials of the proposed addition will be stone, matching the original stone veneer of the structure, which has currently been removed for repair, but will be reinstalled. The dormers of the structure of the new structure will have cement fiber siding with a 5-inch reveal. There will be a fiberglass asphalt shingle, wood windows, wood trim, split face block. Staff would still need to approve materials of final selections as well as a rear railing and material colors. But in general, the proposed materials are compatible with surrounding houses and meet the design guidelines. The addition will have, the current house has a basement level garage, and the addition will extend that basement level garage with three vehicle doors on the right side of the house. And of course, this location is historically appropriate because it matches the existing condition. In summary, staff recommends approval of the proposed rear addition with the condition that staff approve the materials of final window and door selections, rear railing material, roof color, and any stone color, and otherwise finding it to meet the design guidelines for the Woodlawn West neighborhood conservation overlay. I may have said Whitland before, but it is Woodlawn West. And the applicant is here.
I'm Preston Quirk, architect, 2931 Berry Hill Drive in Nashville. Just like I've said times before this board, we're pleased to have a staff recommendation, and I'll answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right. Are there any questions you all might have of Preston? All right. Anyone else that would like to address the commission? I'll close the public hearing. Any comments? Questions? Motion.
I would approve.
Do I hear a second?
3924 Kimball-Long Avenue.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to adopt staff recommendation and second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
May I ask for clarification? Was that with staff recommendations?
It was with staff.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. 1504 Elmwood Avenue.
1504 Elmwood Avenue is an application for the demolition of a non-contributing structure and the construction of new infill and a new accessory structure. The existing building was constructed after 1951, and based on the structure's age, materials, design, form, and other factors, staff has determined that the structure is non-contributing to the Belmont-Hillsborough District and that its demolition meets the design guidelines. Here is the site plan. The new infill will be approximately 38 feet wide with a maximum depth of 71 feet 8 inches, and staff has found that to be compatible with the district. No walkways were indicated on the site plan, and staff asked that a central walkway be added running from the sidewalk to the front porch. The site plan shows that the site slopes approximately 2 to 4 feet from the front of the house to the back of the house. And it might be hard to read on your screen, but if you look at the existing house and its conditions, you can see the photograph on the right is the front of the house, and it's about 2.5 to 3 blocks high, the foundation, and then it slopes to be just about 1/2 to 1 block high in the rear. Staff asks that a condition of approval be that the applicant submit new elevation drawings showing the slope of the site and how the foundation will be treated on the site, because the drawings that were submitted to us treat the site as if it's flat. We want to make sure that the foundation height in relationship to the overall slope of the site is appropriate to the district. Here's an image of the front facade. The proposed structure is 1.5 stories with an approximate height of 26 feet 9 inches from grade. It will have a hipped roof with a slope of 812. This height and roof form match the historic context. The proposed materials are cement fiberboard cladding, split-face concrete block foundation, asphalt shingle roof, and brick porch column bases. Staff asks that the siding proposed for the porch rack, which is indicated in the dotted red box, be eliminated and a more appropriate material be used in that area, like a wood. and not a siding. The front door is proposed to be fiberglass. Fiberglass is not a material that is typically approved by the commission and by staff for such a prominent location, and staff asks that the door be wood instead. With the exception of the fiberglass front door and the siding on the front porch rack, staff finds materials to be appropriate so long as staff review and approve final material samples, like for the brick and the windows and other colors and specifics for the materials. So here are the two side elevations. The side elevations show that the front dormer only sits back 1 foot from the porch rack, and one of the conditions staff is asking for is that it be pushed back an additional foot so that it's 2 feet from the front, setback from the wall of the front porch rack. Staff also asks that a window be added on the right elevation, kind of in the general area of the box indicated. There's just a large expanse of space. I think it's about 23 feet without a window or door opening, and we ask that a window be added there. And then finally, for the side facades, and actually for all the facades, staff asks that a skirt board be added to the foundation line when that's approximately indicated on with the red line on the drawings. Here's the rear elevation. We're not asking for any major changes to that. And also the proposal is calling for a accessory structure, a garage and accessory structure that's detached. The garage is approximately 20 feet 7 inches by 24 feet 7 inches. It will be accessed from the alley, and its garage doors will face the alley. It's proposed to have a ridge height of 24 feet 6 inches and an eave height of 16 feet. Staff finds that the proposed height is too tall for the structure to be considered subordinate to the primary structure. As proposed, it'll be just 2 feet 3 inches lower than the primary structure, and staff asks that the ridge and the eave height, both of those, be reduced by 2 feet to ensure that the accessory structure is subordinate to the primary structure on the site. Again, here are the side elevations of the garage. Staff asks that a trim board be added to the structure's floor level, and that's on all 4 facades, which is approximated here with the red line, and that'll just help to break up the height of the structure and the high eave height. And here are some context photographs. These are photographs of the same side of the street that 1504 Elmwood is on. Staff does find that the form and scale and height and the structure in general meets the historic context. And then here are some photographs of the houses across the street from 1504 Elmwood. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the project with the several conditions that were outlined in the presentation. In the interest of time, I won't relist them all. They're indicated in your staff recommendation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe the applicant is here to answer questions as well.
Thank you. All right, those who'd like to address the commission?
I'm 0 for 1, so I'm going to be quick. I agree with all the conditions.
Okay.
If you guys have any questions for me.
State your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Brent. Office address 9005 Overlook. I agree and appreciate all the help staff gave me on this project. So we're all good.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? At this time, I'll close the public hearing. Are there questions, comments? Motion.
I move to approve recommendations per staff.
At 1504?
At 1504
Okay.
Elmwood Avenue.
All right. Do I hear a second to adopt staff recommendations? Second. Okay, I have a motion and second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. 1203 Forest.
This is one that you've seen before. In April of this year, they received a permit from you to add on to the house. And once they started the addition and started the rehabilitation, unfortunately, they found a significant host of problems and are now before you to ask for demolition of this property. There are 6 main elements that are of concern. One is the rim joists that At least 50% of that is decayed. The floor joists are insufficient. They haven't been repaired properly. They've been cut into for water lines and electrical lines. There's termite damage. The foundation piers are deteriorated. There are no headers over the windows, and they lack top plates. The intersection of the valley rafters and hip rafters are not supported in any way. In some places, they're not even really connected. There's evidence of fire damage, and some of these roof members are structurally compromised and will have to be replaced. So in the staff recommendation, I explained that any one or two of these things are not something that goes to the level of requiring demolition. However, in this case, when you have all of them together, it does make it very difficult to repair any piece when all the other pieces are failing. So staff recommends approval of the application, finding that the level of deterioration, the poor original construction, and the inappropriate repairs have resulted in an economic hardship. Staff finds that the project meets Section 4B2E of the Lockeland Springs East End Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay.
Thank you. Robin,
Yes.
We don't have any proposed construction or new project on this property, did we?
No, we don't, because they had intended on keeping it. So this was something that just came up during the rehab. So you can see here's how the house looked right before they started, and here's the back. And since then, they have found all these other problems. So they will, if it is demolished, they of course will come back to you with a new plan, but they don't have one right now because this was a bit of an emergency situation that came up.
And we're not nervous about leaving a vacant lot like we had been in?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to address the commission? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Are there any comments, discussion? Motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the demolition of, is that 1203 Forest Avenue, per recommendation staff.
All right. We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion.
1809 Sweetbriar.
Hope you missed those long cases. Okay. 1809 Sweetbriar. This is an application actually for infill and an accessory structure in the Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. Brent Craig is the applicant. The picture here is 1809 Sweetbriar Avenue is a non-contributing structure which the MHZC approved demolition of in April, which is last month. The lot is 75 feet wide, which is 25 feet wider than most lots in the vicinity. As you see, the structure has not yet been demolished, although that has been approved. But the applicant is proposing to construct a new single-family dwelling and detached accessory structure to follow that demolition. The height of the new house will be, the new house will be 2 stories with a pyramidal roof. It will have a 30-inch tall foundation, shown on the drawing, with an eave height of 19 feet 4 inches above the foundation line, and the pyramidal roof peak at 31 feet 6 inches above the foundation line, giving the structure a maximum height, as shown from grade on the drawing, at 34 feet. And although the elevations show the lot as being flat, there is actually a considerable drop in grade from right to left. And on historic houses where the lot slopes side to side, typically the foundation at the highest corner will be minimal, perhaps 1 block or 1 course of stone tall, getting taller as the foundation drops with grade. And staff is concerned that without accurate elevations, the true height of the structure upon construction cannot be determined. That's back to the front picture. You can see in the right corner, or on the right side near the tree, it's roughly 1 course and drops down to several by the time you get to the left. The height and roof form of the proposed structure are similar to that of a two-story four-square house. Four-square houses are found in the Belmont-Hillsborough neighborhood, primarily near the center of the district, along Belmont Boulevard and Oakland Avenue. Houses toward the perimeter of the district on streets running east to west are more commonly smaller 1 to 1.5-story houses. All but one of the historic structures on the 18 and 1900 blocks of Sweetbriar, which are one block without a cross street, are continuous without a cross street. All of those houses are 1 or 1.5-story houses, all but one, ranging from 18 feet to 24 feet tall from grade. And the lone two-story house on this part of the street is at 1913 Sweetbriar, which I have a laser pointer, but I don't think you'll see it on the screen. But 1913 Sweetbriar Avenue is a 25-foot tall colonial revival-style house constructed circa 1930. Staff finds that the proposed height of the new structure, although not 100% knowable because of the drawing, but to the extent that it is significantly taller than houses on this block in this part of the street and would not be compatible with the historic context and would not meet design guideline 2B1A. The front facade of the structure will be 42 feet wide with a full-width front porch. The front porch would project 8 feet forward of the front wall. It would have a nearly square footprint, 42 feet long along the left wall, with a projection going back to 56 feet long along the right. And although this scale may be appropriate for a 1 or 1.5-story house, staff finds that the massing of a 2-story house is not compatible with the historic context of this area of Sweetbriar, again, not meeting guideline 2B1B. For setbacks, the front face of the wall would match the orientation, which is perpendicular or parallel, depending on how you look, to the street. And this front setback would align with front setbacks of nearby historic structures. The side setback, however, would be 5 feet 6 inches on the left, which is on the right on the picture because north is up, but on the left, and 27 feet 6 inches on the right. Historic houses in the surrounding area are typically more centered. Staff finds that the proposed location shifted to the side would not be compatible with the established setback pattern on the street, and that does not meet design guideline 2B1C. Oh, I guess that's my last photo there. The details and design materials we're not given additional analysis since the form, height, and scale of the setback were deemed to be inappropriate. In addition, because the submittal needs additional further clarification on the elevation showing the actual grade, because there appears to be significant change. Some things that we noticed were that the double windows on the front could not be constructed as shown with the certain mullions that are shown on there. The site and floor plans that were submitted indicate that there would be a covered deck at the rear of the structure, but it wasn't shown on the elevations, and we have additional concerns about some of the materials that aren't labeled, which would need to be known. In summary, staff is recommending disapproval of the new structure and garage, finding their massing, height, and scale to be incompatible with the surrounding historic houses, and that the project does not meet Section 2B1 for new construction in the Belmont-Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Overlay. And I believe that's it. I don't think we've gotten any public comment on this one.
Have any questions for staff? If not, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody here that would like to address the commission?
Actually, I will clarify, you did receive some public comment, but I received that in time to email it to you.
Yes, okay. You want to just pull your chair up? I'm only kidding.
I have more handouts from
We're only allowed 3, right?
Wear him out today.
One for staff too. Didn't want to leave you guys out. Hello, I'm Brent. I'm 1 for 1. I'm feeling better now. I'm at 9005 Overlook Boulevard. It's the office address. I want to address a couple things. The first, we get the easy stuff out of the way. The design of the house, this house was approved for us on Cedar Street. And in your packet, I think it's the first photo of the painted brick house it says currently built at 1405 Cedar. And looking at the application and getting ready, I apologize. My wife was out of town last week, and I've got kids, so it was a rough week. So I looked at this this week, and I sent. We've made adjustments on that plan based on what we approved last time. So the penetrations on the side were added on this particular plan. You can see them down by the fireplace, and some of the other stuff that were labeled. It would be the very plan that was approved in the previous build. So we weren't trying to change anything. I just believe I inadvertently sent the wrong plan. So I think the design element issues that are that were the concern are easily addressed and taken care of in that manner. Same thing with do you mind going back to your site plan? Here we go. Site plan, we have room to move the house from left to right. All I need is 12 feet for the driveway. So we can get the house almost centered on the lot. What in the placement of the house is we were trying to mimic the original footprint as it was, because there's a large tree in the front. If you see the picture, the proposed property on, I think it's like the third or fourth page, that if we move it over and then have to, because of the setbacks of the house around it, we were trying to save that tree. But the centering part on the lot can be adjusted. That's nothing more than we were just matching what the original house driveway was. There's a beautiful stone wall on the left-hand side. There's a natural pea gravel driveway there that we're again trying to save, but if we can certainly shift the house if need be. So those, I believe, are easy concerns. If you also notice the picture that on the on the original built house and the proposed house, one of the suggestions in the original build from last year was that we decreased the roof pitch so it doesn't stick up as much, and that was something that we also would want to work with staff on, making sure the height of it is. That's the easy part. The biggest part I want to address is the placement of a 4-square home on that section of the block. If you don't mind, I wish I was all technical. The second page of the little packet I gave you has a map. Can you go to the map where you have, or the blow up of the left-hand side? That map there stops at Hawthorne, which is showing the block, and 1809 is 3 houses off the edge, the block of Hawthorne. It's 1809 on your map, and it's in 1950s. Again, we wrote the dates from the tax map, but don't know how accurate that is. That was the only way we knew how to find it, was the tax map record. If you orientate it from the bottom where you can read it, and you go to the right, there are 5 2-story homes on the right side of that block, on the other side of Hawthorne. The addresses are 1721, 1719, 2 that were just built that were approved last year at 1709, 1707, 1708, 1704, and a very large pitched 2-story home that would exceed the height of my house at 1720. And all of those homes, the starting of those homes would be within 3 houses of that. Now, there is noted on your plan the corner lot of, I guess it's 3 on the map that it's on the screen. I know we're talking numbers, and I know it's so difficult, and I apologize. 359, the corner lot there on Hawthorne and Sweetbriar, it is a non-contributing home. So that would be one that we could not consider. You see me pointing that out, Robin? I'm on your side there. We can't consider that one, but that one would be the closest one. However, the one next to it we can. So the 223 is only 4 houses, 4 houses down from mine to the right. So on Sweetbriar, just within a matter of 500 feet, there's 5 houses of 4 square, that 4 square look. And as a reference or as a precedent that was kind of what we were following was over on, don't tell me I didn't write it on this page, Beechwood. What's the address, Jamie? 2007 Beechwood. You guys approved a big tear down and a big 4 square, and the closest 4 square that resembled it on that home was 6 houses down. So this is this 4 square that I'm proposing is actually closer to a contributing structure that resembles it than the one that was approved on Beechwood. I don't know that the dates in this factor have anything or any large a factor as compared to what we were talking about earlier on Wildwood. However, I do believe if you could turn back some of the pictures to the reference houses across the street, that yours are better than mine. That's why I'm using yours. And I guess this is a question for staff before I speak, because I don't want to look any more ignorant. Are you showing those as to be all contributing homes? So 1815 Cedar is to be a contributing home at 1940. 1814 Sweetbriar is 1940. The one directly across the street was 1950. That's 1805. Do you have a picture of that?
I think these are the only ones, contact photos I have. And then that one in 1805, immediately to the left of this is non-contributing.
Yeah, both of the one to the left of me is non-contributing. The one to the right to me is non-contributing. The one on the 2 to the right is non-contributing, and the 2 across the street are non-contributing.
Wrong way. 1800 and 1814 are, well, the first 3, 1800, 1802, and 1814 are across the street as.
What about 1805?
That was the one that's immediately to the left. I don't have another photo of it, but that's not contributing.
I'm reading that wrong. I'm sorry. I apologize. 1806.
I don't think I have a photo of it.
Tax records show 1950, and then 1908
right, and
was
we would say that
1950.
one's non-contributing. Again, from the 1944 city directory, 1806 was not there. It was there in 1951, but it was listed as vacant.
We understand that
so the house was there, but not occupied.
Yeah, the packet is in the book, but I understand that we're not supposed to compare, but I'm trying to show that there are non-contributing structures, and part of the build back and the guidelines is the economic development that would be coming that way. So there are from my research, which I would like to review with staff to make sure I'm right, that 50% of the houses on that block, or approximately 50% of the houses, are potential tear down and rebuilds, that this 4 square structure is not unusual for the street and potentially is going to be the standard for that block if the economic development continues on. And the precedence that was shown in the past of allowing the 4 square within 5 to 6 houses is in line with what was happening. As far as the placement of the house and the penetrations and things, I think that we can certainly take care of that at staff level.
All right. Anyone else would like to address the commission? Thank you. All right. I'll close the public hearing. Discussion?
I have one question. Is there a driveway from the street with the existing house on this lot?
Yes, there is, to the right of the existing, maybe that shows it all right.
So in the approximate same location that he's proposing, is that right?
Yeah, yes. I guess I don't have.
And is there an improved alley behind?
There is an alley, although the comments from the Planning Commission, we send all applications, infill applications to them for comment, is just that they would like to see future development include reconstruction of the alley. Although, from my observation, there appeared to be an alley, so that comment was not entirely clear.
When you say reconstruction, another improvement so that there is alley service? No. Presently, there's not?
No. Perhaps the applicant can better answer that.
May I speak to that? If you look at the map that I gave, it is the apartments that are kind of behind it have the alley is overgrown and it is unusable. An alley for us is better. We would prefer to have alley, and our customers would as well. But the alley is unusable and unpassable.
Okay, but there is right of way, and the Planning Commission is asking that be reutilized. Is that what you just said, Sean?
Yes, that was their comment. As redevelopment occurs on the street, efforts should be made to construct the alley. Okay. Although, I mean, that sort of would entail getting the owners of 1805 and 1801 Sweetbriar on board as well.
Okay.
I guess in constructing an island alley is, I don't know how helpful that is.
Okay. All right.
Did you get the picture I sent around to you? Has it made it around there to you yet?
Yes, thank you.
Sean, did any of his remarks change anything from your recommendations?
No, I don't believe so. First, our concerns are with the drawings at this point not being able to review it. Well, we can review it, but even the most thorough review is going to be incomplete because the height upon construction can't be known without knowing what the grade is. And then these photographs just exhibit the context of the area, which is another minimal traditional type of section of the neighborhood with 1 and 1.5 story houses.
But not only, I'm just clarifying in my mind, not only is the disapproval by the staff being made because of the type of structure, but also the information that was provided is incomplete. It doesn't reflect the way the elevations would, as it would sit on the lot.
Correct.
Okay.
Both those two things.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I have a question for staff. The images that we see here, all 4 of those contributing?
These 4, yes. These 4 were all 1944 or earlier.
And are all of those in the same block?
Yeah, here we go. These are the addresses.
I was having trouble following all the addresses and.
Yeah. Actually, the map that Mr. Craig passed out is probably, because it's in color, pretty helpful if you want to use that.
That should get me some points.
Okay. And so, I don't know which way. There's north on this, but is it east of Hawthorne Place?
Yes.
The character changes significantly.
Right here.
Yeah, it changes, I would say, midway along the 1700 block. The 1700 starts at Oakland Avenue, and Oakland, and actually that one is shown in Mr. Craig's presentation as well. The very last page, 1704, that's a four-square house, a historic four-square. And then the second to last page, 1707 and 1709, are recent infill that are in the four-square form. But as you move west from there, they drop off, the sizes drop and they become one story. To the point that 1717 is the westernmost historic two-story house, and then from Hawthorne east are all one story with the exception of that one colonial revival house that's 25 feet tall.
May I ask a question of staff? Possible. When you talk about the what you're talking about, the height of the house, where you're talking about the concern of what that's going to be, the height of the house is not going to be any different than what you had said in your statement about whatever the highest point is. If hypothetically the house is 32 feet, well, from the highest point it's going to be 32 feet. That's it. It's not going to be any higher than that from whatever the highest point is, and the grade may fall off for drainage. If we just need to know that, whatever that distance is, does that make?
Well, it makes sense, except that I look at the plan, and when we look at those, we want to see the true elevation and what the foundation is going to be,
yes,
how many blocks that foundation is going to be. On one side, and it's different from the other. So those are the kind of incomplete things that.
Well, may I ask a question two different ways? That when you guys render your decision, that we render it, that if I correct the plans and resubmit it and give you better elevations, it would be okay, or that the four square won't work?
Well, I think what the staff is telling us that the four square is not going to work.
Yeah, so I think is that what we're going to address
today? We're not here
today?
to negotiate. We're here to sort of give you direction, maybe, and then come up with some advice to staff to help you.
Perfect.
Build something on that line.
That'd be great.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I'm done. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Listen.
All right. Any other comments, directions?
My last case.
Motions? Action.
I make the motion to, per staff recommendation, to disapprove this new structure and garage at 1809 Sweetbriar Avenue.
Okay. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Okay. I have a motion and a second. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion passes. This is adopting staff recommendation. 1416 Gartner.
This is Mr. Alexander's case, so it'll be just a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
All right, 1416 Gartland Avenue is an application for new construction of additions to a contributing structure in the Lockeland Springs East End Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. The applicant is Peggy Newman. I do not see her in attendance. 1416 Gartland Avenue is a 1.5-story transitional Victorian house with a partial width recessed porch and a steep pitched pyramidal roof. You can look at the historic photo in the corner there. Can't really see it in the current photo because of trees and shrubbery. The house was constructed circa 1910 and is considered, as I said, to be contributing. The applicant is proposing to enlarge the house by constructing side dormers on the side slopes of the existing structure and a rear addition, which would have shed dormers. The rear addition will set in 1 foot from each side of the walls of the house on the footprint and extend back 19 feet towards the rear. The roof of the addition will be a rear-facing gable, matching the pitch of the existing roof, with the ridge set 1 foot below the ridge of the existing hip pyramid. There will be, as I said, a shed dormer on each of the side slopes of the new roof, originating behind the rear wall of the historic house. The walls of the dormers will set 2 feet in from the walls below them. The new hipped dormers on the historic structure that are also proposed. There'll be one on each side of the historic house. The new side dormers would match the form and pitch of the existing original or historic front dormer, which would meet the design guidelines. However, staff finds that because the left of those two dormers would require removal of an existing chimney, that would not be appropriate. Removal of it, architectural features, does not meet the design guidelines. Staff does not recommend approval of that left dormer here on the front elevation. A rear chimney would also be removed, but that is appropriate because it is not visible from the right-of-way and it is not a character-defining feature of the historic house. The materials of the addition will be smooth cement fiber clapboard siding, wood windows, fiberglass asphalt shingle, and split-face concrete block. The windows, I think I already said, but the windows and doors will be wood, and there will be a wooden rear uncovered deck. These materials are compatible and meet the design guidelines. Other guidelines I won't elaborate, but it meets in terms of proportion and rhythm of openings, roof, form, pitch. In summary, staff recommends approval of the application to construct a rear addition and right side dormer at 1416 Gartland Avenue, finding this application to meet the design guidelines for additions in Lockeland Springs East End Neighborhood Conservation Overlay. Staff recommends against approval of the new left side dormer because it would require the removal of an original chimney, which would not meet the design guidelines. Yeah, I thought I had a picture. And also, for the record on this one, we have received comments from a neighbor, which I believe have been distributed. I believe that was actually, yeah, I'll let you read it.
Thank you. This item is open for public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the commission? Come forward and give your name and address. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and discussion.
Did we receive comment via email today?
I can summarize that for you a little bit. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but they did not want to see either of the two dormers approved, feeling that it changed the historic roof form, especially if only one of them was going to be approved, then that would create an imbalance. And I think that's pretty much.
Okay. All right. Any questions of staff? Do I hear a motion? No discussion.
I was looking to see what impact the dormers had on the floor plan.
Any concerns?
I just have one question. Did staff review the extent of damage and condition of the chimney and take that into consideration? And I guess the image of the chimney here on the left chimney is substantially lower chimney than was there originally, it appears. Is that right?
We did review it, but going by the guidelines that we have to follow, removal of an architectural feature does not meet the design guidelines. I discussed this with the applicant. They expressed an interest to come and explain the condition of the chimney in an attempt to persuade the commission to approve it as it was submitted, but again, they're not here.
What was your assessment of the condition of the chimney?
It looks like it's in rough shape. Technically, I suppose it's probably not functioning. She said she didn't send pictures, but she said you should see the inside, which I haven't seen. But I assume that means that it's a non-functioning chimney. As you can see, it's because several feet shorter than it would have been originally. It probably doesn't meet code for current use because it would be required to be a certain height above the adjacent roof structure.
It's interesting. I wonder if some of that damage was done during the tornado, because I know all of our chimneys wreaked havoc during that, and they look sort of like that.
Well, in so many of these chimneys, the mortars just disintegrate.
Yeah.
And, it's several $1,000s to just simply get it, safe, not necessarily functioning, but safe often. So I can understand the staff's recommendation based on the guidelines, though I suppose, given the assessment of the condition of the chimney, we could approve this with the hardship being that there's, the condition of this chimney and the cost to repair it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense.
If a third of it's gone, it's architecturally maybe not intact, so you could argue that the architectural feature is...
For the most part, gone.
Right, right.
Although they're not here to speak for themselves, so
Yeah.
they can't.
Well, I'm kind of bothered about the one on one side and one not on the other.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's bad enough that one of them's that kind of dormer and the other is the other kind of dormer. I mean, the old dormer type. I forget.
This is the left elevation. So I think I have a front. Yeah, the front it has a low slope with a wide decorative window. The new dormer, same basic shape, although I believe that those would be more modern awning type windows.
Yeah, I find this new side dormer is closest to the front of the building, in scale with the structure and setback from the walls and from the front of the home. I think the rear dormer, it's not a super attractive roof form, but really isn't going to be seen, from the street. The elevation, you sort of see it, doesn't make a whole, it doesn't look very good in front elevation, but I think from the street it'll be so far back.
That's true.
Was it only the chimney, the basis for the disapproval or recommended disapproval?
That's correct. And for the front, or the right side elevation has essentially the same thing, but because it doesn't require removal of an original feature, it meets the design guidelines in form, materials, location. And I agree with your assessment of the rear dormers. They're on a non-original portion of the structure and more than 40 feet back from the front of the structure.
Would we, conditionally, could we ask them to present to us the hardship about the chimney, and if in fact, and then if that were the case, leave it up to staff approval to approve the second dormer?
Yes, we'd be very comfortable with that.
Okay. We just need to get that into a motion that is understandable. Do you understand what we're asking?
Go for it.
Well, I can't make the motion, but somebody else can.
I was going to go at it from a different angle, so before I make the motion, just say that we approve this recommendation with staff's and also the disapproval of the chimney, and they would have to come back to us with showing that it's a hardship to save the chimney.
I don't think we wouldn't ask them to come back if they would prove to staff.
Oh, I
that
got
it
you,
was a
I got you,
hardship.
I got you, okay. I move approval of the new construction at 1416 Gartland Avenue, but also accepting the disapproval, am I headed right, of the chimney unless they, help me here.
I was going to go at it the opposite. If I could.
Yeah.
Make a suggestion.
I give up.
She's withdrawn her motion.
Well, I can't figure out how to, yeah.
That we, I move we approve the addition, the construction at 1416 Gartland Avenue as proposed, with the understanding that the applicant will present, under the assumption that the applicant will present a legitimate hardship for preserving the existing chimney to staff. Is that adequate?
I'll second that.
Is that
clear? Okay, and that they do not have to come back here, but if the hardship is accepted by staff, the 2 dormers will be built. Okay. All right. Clarification on the motion. Okay, there's a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay.
One more?
One more. 105 4th Avenue South.
Whoops, one more. On this building in the Broadway district, staff approved a small projecting sign in November of last year, and that has not been constructed yet. The building was also recently painted, however, it was previously painted, so that met the design guideline. In addition, staff approved a small rear addition back in October of last year. The applicant now proposes 2 painted signs on either side of the building, which takes it over its sign limit. Because painted signs are prevalent in Broadway district and something that you see historically, staff recommends allowing for the 2 painted signs by setting a policy for both this and future projects that would allow for 1 painted sign not to count within the signage allotment, since painted signs were traditionally secondary signage elements and the locations where they are feasible is minimal. And then within your staff recommendation, I have proposed further policy that could be added to the guidelines about approving painted signs, which I won't bother to read aloud to you now, but that would be a part of this.
And this is just for that district?
Just for this district, correct, just for the Broadway Historic District. Staff recommends approval of the 2 proposed painted signs, finding that they meet the design guidelines, with the exception of the number of signs per building. Staff suggests 1 painted sign be allowed that is not counted towards the signage allotment, and with this clarification of the design guidelines, the project meets Section 3 of the design guidelines for the Broadway Historic Preservation Zoning Overlay.
Would we want to be a little bit more specific on the size of the painted signs?
Yes, and that is in the policy that is suggested that talks about the number. Painted signs should only be added to rear elevations or exposed upper secondary elevations. It should not cover transoms, columns, cornices, decorative elements, openings, and architectural features, or require the enclosure of any openings. Painted signs on main facades on the first level are not appropriate. Generally, a painted sign should not be more than 125 square feet in size, which addresses the size.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Oh, that's fine. Painted signs should serve as a sign for the current occupant and not advertise other products or off-site businesses. In general, it should be truly signage and not just painted murals. should have no lighting in most cases, and it should not use metallic or day glow paints.
Okay.
Is the policy that we recommend.
Okay. All right. Anyone, it's just a public hearing. Anybody would like to address the commission on this? Please come forward, give your name and address. You've waited this long. Now you can, it's your turn.
My name should be Joe, but
Take your time.
but it's not. It's Jim Rowan, and name of my company has signed me up, and we're the company that are painting those on the side of the building. And they're not monstrous,
Okay.
And I think that's why the staff agreed that it was appropriate. So that's all I really have to say.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you very
for being
much.
patient. All right. Anyone else have any comments? Anybody have a question for him? I'll move to close to the public hearing and ask for comments.
I have a
Discussion?
question for staff. I see what you're doing here, and I'm not sure I have a suggestion. However, I wonder if there's a better set of words that could be used that doesn't. I'm concerned with language that says to allow for one painted sign without counting it towards the signage allotment.
Okay.
That's kind of counterintuitive to say, yeah, we have this many signs, but we're not counting one. I mean, when you go and you look, you count something. And I guess the solution is not to increase the number of signs, because then that might change all kinds of things. But
calling them additional signs.
Or calling it something else. Saying there are signs and then there are X's. And you can have an X or two X's, one on each side of your building if it meets certain guidelines. But it just concerns me to say, to torture the language that way.
Sure, and we can look at another word for that. We initially had them called murals, but murals often are considered scenic paintings, and this is not really what we were talking about, so we changed from murals to painted signs, but we can look at another alternative as well.
I guess you could say we allow for painted signs meeting certain guidelines. They are to be distinguished from blade signs or other signs, or you're right, maybe if there was a different word for sign, and I understand where you started with mural, and I can't do it right now, but I would recommend
And I can't either, but we can certainly look into it.
All right.
All right, okay, but we do have the application of the signage at 105 4th Avenue South. Any discussion?
Do we have to technically approve the policy today to justify approving this, or can we go ahead and approve this, and then once you come back with the language, revised language, consider the policy?
Yes. You can approve the sign today, and we can continue to work on the policy forever if we wish.
And the verbiage. Forever.
I'll move we approve the proposed signage at 104 5th Avenue South.
Good. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. New business? Anything else?
We just wanted to remind you about the Tennessee Preservation Trust annual conference that's coming up May 31st through June, mostly at the Hotel Indigo downtown. And as a part of that, we are going to have an old house fair, which will be on Saturday, June 2nd at Eastwood Christian Church. This is a great opportunity to talk to vendors of different products and different services that are specific to old buildings. So that's open to everybody. Anyone can come, please come. There's going to be a lot of great vendors there. Also, also for you, specific for you, is camp, which is the Commissioner's Assistance Mentoring Program on Thursday. And I believe 2 of you have signed up, maybe more since I last saw the list. That's 8:30 to 4, May 31st, downtown. It is all day. If anyone would like to attend, we'd love to have you. This is a great opportunity, and it's being paid for by the by TPT and THC. So this is a good opportunity. We want to take advantage of it if we can. And then again, if you can head to Norfolk, Virginia in July, the NAPC Forum, and the NAPC is the organization that provides that camp training.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Meeting adjourned.